Now, moving forward, which is another good move done by the government, Adam, former speakers and former prime ministers have been given a sum totaling to, let's look at that, 350 for former speakers and deputy speakers, and another sum to former prime ministers who will be given this money by the government. Remember, yesterday Adam was speaking about the fact that former presidents, their families will be given 1 billion Ugandan shillings each, and the 7 presidents, putting it up to 7 billion Ugandan shillings, and then former governors will be given 350 billion Ugandan shillings to be distributed among them. And this time we have former speakers, and then we have former governors, former prime ministers. A lot of money on board, Adam. What is your say about it?
It's a lot of money, Latifa, and then I'm starting to wonder why, the timing, why is it coming now? And, the president, 9 billion. It is a lot of money, though I think the families deserve it, though it's a lot of money. I don't know if it's a lot of money to a common person like me, and it would be, and then to the speakers and deputy speakers. I think these people having, public offices, they're supposed to have benefits, that help them. And I think that money is there. This thing of just, thinking about something that probably, let's give these people money, let's do this. I think there should be a plan. For example, when you have an office, for example, of a president or, for example, your vice president or a speaker or what, there should be benefits that are stipulated within the constitution of the law that somebody needs to get this money when they retire.
Definitely.
Okay, according to, not just because they work for the government, but according to the position they held. So I think there needs to be some kind of plan, because I don't think this was, is it something that is going to go on from now? Is it, because it's just coming it's just bumming into our eyes. So I think there needs to be a plan, and I think, Latifa, there are some benefits that they are getting, because there are somewhere where I read and they were saying that these people get benefits. For example, the vice president, when you retire, you get some benefits. So this money, I think it's for, it's an addition to what they have been getting. Probably it's not enough.
But the benefits don't last for long. We know that the wife to Idi Amin is still in court dealing with her husband's properties. And of course, Lukwago is helping her through the process. And yesterday, Rebecca Kadaga, the speaker, summoned the Minister of Lands to explain about the issue of Idi Amin's land and why the widow was complaining about the fact that her husband's property was taken away from her. So that information is there. Now, the vice presidents will be getting 400. And the speakers will be getting 350 add-ons. Should we go through the process of who the speakers were from the first parliament to the 10th and 11th now as we're speaking? We know, however, that Rebecca Kadaga took the mantle in 2011 until now. She's still here making her 10th year in parliament, and before her was Sekandi. Now let's look at the speakers from the first parliament to the last one, and then among the speakers that are there, who are going to be given that money and who is not going to be given that money. Now, the first parliament, of course, was before Uganda gained its independence. And John Bowes Griffiths was the one who was there in the National Assembly. That was from 1962 to 1966. And the period was in 1962, 1963, 1966 May is when they left, and those were 2 people, John Bowes Griffin and Narendra M. Patel. Now, those 2 families I know are not going to be given the money. We're starting from when the independence Uganda started in 1986. Now, after that was the first parliament. The second parliament was taken over by Narendra M. Patel, who took over from 1967 to 1971, and that is the second parliament, still before Uganda got its independence. And then we have...
But that is 1963 to 1971. I think the first parliament is 1962 is when the National Assembly...
That was the first parliament.
It's the first parliament, and 1962 is when we got independence, isn't it? So I think these are counting, the excluding at the very first parliament of, you know, what happened there.
Exactly, after, oh my bad. It is what happened before Yoweri Kaguta Museveni took over power. The speakers that were there in 1996 after Yoweri Museveni took over power. Because before that, of course, we had those particular ones, the first ones who were put over by the British, who were put in charge by the British, and then we have the Ugandan ones who took over power as well. Thank you for that correction, Adam. And then we know that the third parliament was in 1979 to 1980, and this is when we had Edward Rugumayo, the chairperson, and his family will also be given the money. He's going to be considered as the first Ugandan who was the Speaker of Parliament in the Third National Consultative Council.
We have the next one is the 50th Parliament. This is what I was telling you yesterday, Latifa.
The fourth Parliament.
Really, the fourth?
Yeah, because I've just done the third Parliament.
Okay, this is 1980 to 1985. It was during Obote's regime, and the fourth speaker was Francis Butajira, and this was a trained lawyer from Harvard, and he was there during Obote's regime. It was only, I think it lasted for only 4 years until the 50th Parliament, when Yoweri Kaguta Museveni came with the National Resistance Council, and this is what I was telling you, he was the speaker then.
So. He was, of course, he had to start off his parliament by being his own speaker and telling them what he needed to do. However, he also had the vice, who was Haji Moses Chigongo, and he chaired most of the NRC's meeting, and we could say Haji Moses Chigongo was the deputy speaker at that time during Museveni's reign when he was the first speaker. So is he going to also remit money?
He needs to get money.
Of course not. Come on, he's the president and he's still the current president of Uganda. We're talking about the former speakers, and he's still in there. And then the sixth parliament, of course, from 1996 to 2001 was James Wapakabulo. You remember James Wapakabulo? One of the very many professors in Mbale. He had his home, and in his home, which was in Mbale, it's a historic site, and I've been to it. He had a laboratory where he'd teach people chemical engineering, and he did have a certificate, so it was taken away from him. And if you go there, you can still see the sites that was set up for students going to study. And sometimes he'd have those students spend nights in his home, and his home is vast and big and beautiful, and it can see the hills of Mbale from 100 miles. It's a beautiful site, and I've been there. So I do remember James Wapahabulu, one of the guys who is celebrated in Mbale. And then later Francis Ayume, who took over the assembly of 1994 to 1995, and these two ruled until 2001 as speakers in the parliament. Adam.
And there came the man that most of you have seen, Edward II is now the Vice President of Uganda. That is when...
from 2001 to 2006, and then from 2006 to 2006 to 11, and then Rebecca Kadaga took over from 2011 to 16, and she's still there from 2016 to 21, and we're waiting to see whether she'll take a third term, and she'll be a unique a person to have taken 3 of the parliamentary terms, yet everybody else and her predecessors had maximum 2 terms as Speaker of Parliament. Now, all these are the things that we reminisce and think about when we think about the Speakers of Parliament. And what about the Vice Presidents, Adam? Because we have the Vice Presidents of Uganda as well, because they will be given money, and the Vice Presidents of Uganda will be given 400 million Ugandan shillings, while the Speakers will be given 350 million Ugandan shillings. Now, when we look at the Vice Presidents, there was a time when there was a vacancy for a very long time, and during Idi Amin's time, we also see that there was a long vacancy of only one person being the Vice President of Uganda, and then there was disputed de facto during his time. Now let's start from the first one. That is William Wilberforce Kadumbula Nadiope III on October 1963, and that's when he was inaugurated, and he left office in April 1966, and he was under the Edward Mutesa government. He was, however, disposed of during the Mengo crisis that happened, and we all remember that happened during the Obote time when he was trying to take over government from Mutesa.
Now, William Wilberforce, because now, according to history, Obote was the prime minister, and then the Kabaka was the president. But then the prime minister had a lot of powers.
He did.
Now the vice president here is getting a lot of
issues in between. Like when two elephants fight, the grass is the one that suffers. So at that time, the grass, which was the vice president, suffered a lot.
Did he really suffer?
No, he did. If you look at his government and how he was deposed of during the Mengo crisis, it's exactly what happened. Adam, the second one.
The second one is Mustafa Idris, and this was under Amin's regime, 1979. Amin had a vice president.
Definitely.
Yes, so this man probably is going to get one of those, is one of those that is going to get money during, but you know, this one deserves money. Amin's regime
you can see the long one,
yes,
and
the
then
family,
what happened during then.
So I think the family, if the family is there, congratulations to you, Mustafa Idrisi, yes, during Amin's regime.
Definitely. Now, before Amin's regime, however, there was John Babiha from April 1966. And he left office in January, yes, under Milton Obote. And he was also deposed of in the 1971 coup d'etat. You remember the coup d'etat? And then in January 1971 to 1977, when Amin took over, of course, it was vacant at the time until Mustafa Idrisi took over in 1977. And then later, Mustafa also was disputed and claimed in November 1978 to November 1980. Adam.
Then we had Paul Mwanga. Yes, Paul Mwanga, 1980, and this was during Obote still, and until he was disposed of in 1985. Coup d'etat, you know, coup d'etat is a very common word in our history. And then the rest of the years that came by, 1985 to 1991, it was vacant. You know, we had a lot of, you know, wars here, changing people. That's when the presidents came in. This one, 3 months, 200 days. So until when Samson Chiseka came in 1991 to 1994, I think this was during Museveni's regime. Museveni had come in until when we got the very first woman, Latifa.
Celebrated woman. Now we know that Paul Mwanga was, of course, in Milton Obote's time, just as we remember, and that was the second time that Milton Obote had taken over power from Idi Amin Dada. Exactly, Obote 2 is the word for its person, but Obote 2 regime. And then we know that after Samson Chiseka during Museveni's regime, Specioza Kazibwe, the most celebrated first woman vice president in Uganda, was there, and that's why people are questioning why Rebecca Kadaga does not want to take the vice president position.
And you know, there's some history about it. The first woman in Africa to hold that position in a sovereign country. The first woman in Africa. So I think it's a very big thing. Like Latif, it just takes us back to the conversation of, you know, what kind of person you are. She's, you know, the name is big.
Exactly.
Yes.
When you talk of Specioza Kazibwe, everybody remembers that history that was attached to her, and everybody remembers the things she did while she was the vice president of Uganda at that time. And we hope that even if Rebecca Kadaga does not want the position and she goes back to his speakership, President will think about bringing a second vice president into his parliament who is a woman. And we can see another woman like Suluhu Hassan taking over the vice presidency of this country. Adam, why are you smiling? You're thinking about the death of Magufuli and Suluhu Hassan taking over as the president.
No.
People have different opportunities and people have different things that happen to them. And then later, after, of course, Specioza Kazibwe, we have Gilbert Bukenya. Everybody remembers Professor Gilbert Bukenya, who took over from May 23rd, 2003 to May 23rd, 2011, when at the time Rebecca Kadaga was taking over the speakership, and then finally Edward Sekandi, who is still the Vice President of Uganda, and he was the Speaker of Parliament from 2001 to 2011. And we see that there's speculations that he may not be the Vice President anymore in the next Parliament. What do you think?
Probably the President can change. I think he can change. Okay. And a lot of things are playing out. He has been there for a while now, and you know, he lost. This means support, you know, support-wise there's a problem, and though I don't think that's one of the reasons as to why the president should decide on, though it's one of the issues down there in the people. You know, he lost the constituency in Bukoto, and you know, we don't see what is really happening. So I think the president needs to make a reshuffle. We don't know if Kadaga will accept or they will bring someone else. And who do you think, Latif, it could be? If Kadaga doesn't, and then Edward II is to be dropped?
Well, there's speculations that the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, Amama Mbabazi, could be picked as the Vice President of Uganda. We're waiting to see if that happens. Candidate. Now, what happened was Amama Mbabazi was the Prime Minister. He left the position, he became a presidential candidate, and then he left Museveni's circle for a while. I think Museveni was still mad at him. And then later he came back after Museveni forgave him. He came back into the circle. He had traveled outside the country. So he came back into the country, and now we can see that where there are meetings, where Museveni is, Amama Mbabazi's face is shown, and that means he's back in the good books of President Museveni, and the speculation that he could be our next vice president.
I think he's a smart guy, though the claims of Kadaga still play in. What am I going to do in that position? You know, what's my mandate? A vice president does this, does that. But though that is a discussion we already had, so we can't go back there. So
I think the main point of a vice president, whether we want to accept it or not, they become the advisor to the president. Because remember when Suluhu Hassan was with John Pombe Magufuli and they were arguing about the COVID-19 pandemic and how to deal with it, Suluhu Hassan was one person who kept telling John Pombe Magufuli, we need to tell the Tanzanian people to put on their masks. Now, John Pombe Magufuli was stubborn. But remember, behind every successful man is definitely a woman. So Suluhu Hassan kept pushing her way. And we know before John Pombe Magufuli died, it was one of the things that he considered, although he did it in the corridors and he told the Tanzanian people while whispering, make sure that you put on your masks, make sure that you wash your hands. When he realized that COVID-19 is real, and that happened when the Zanzibar president died at that time. And that is when he realized, and he was his friend, then John Pombe Magufuli realized that COVID-19 is real and I need to do something to protect my people. But remember, he had again said earlier on that it wasn't in existence, and he was coming back against his word, so he had to whisper that to the Tanzanian people. But I know for sure Suluhu Hassan's advice played a role in ensuring that he made and changed his mind.
And you know, Atifa, we are speaking about Tanzania, and you know, we're in Uganda, and we have a lot of differences. You know, everything is different.
But if you look at the relationship between Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and Rebecca Kadaga, it hasn't been the worst relationship in history. We know that Rebecca Kadaga and President Museveni, of course, behind the camera lenses, have had a very good relationship. And Museveni has a very soft spot for Rebecca Kadaga. That we know for sure. Now imagine Rebecca Kadaga was actually the one advising Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and they have never been at a point where they're at loggerheads like the way Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was with the Prime Minister Amama Mbabazi. So we're looking at a situation where I think Rebecca Kadaga could make a very good vice president in advising the president on what to do, and he would actually consider the advice of Rebecca Kadaga.
I think you're trying to liken the words advice with advising, which I think is so different.
It's not really about advising. It's the fact that I know for sure it's one of the duties that a vice president does, of course, behind the camera lenses, is advising the president on what to do.
And the president has advisors, and you know, it's on record. The president makes his own decisions.
Of course he does, but he goes in line with the advisors. Imagine if the president made a decision and there was no Jennifer Fulfigure advising him about the ghetto, and there was no Butcherman advising him about the ghetto. So he needs advice about things. And Rebecca Kadaga, in her experience, 10 years experience as Speaker of Parliament, and dealing with both the opposition and the government, and also being like a mitigator between the two parties, and the opposition liking her, will be a very good advisor to the president.
Yeah, in terms of advising, and if God blesses us and it happens, I think it can be good. Yes, Kadaga, it can be good. Though I'm just skeptical about the vice president advising the president.
I think it could happen. I mean, there's no way the vice president could just sit there without giving a word or two of advice to the president.
Okay.
Yes. Now the conversation will definitely be left to to you on your platforms for you to tell us what exactly you think about the money that is being distributed to the different people. Yesterday, we had former presidents' families, and then we had the governors, and then now we have the vice president who will be receiving 400 million, and then the former speakers who will be receiving the 350 million. However, we also note that among the speakers are people who are still in power to date. Rebecca Kadaga is there, Edward Sekandi is there, Gilbert Bukenya is somewhere there in the middle, and we know that they're all alive, they're all kicking, they're all still here, and we're waiting to see if that money will also be given to people such as Rebecca Kadaga, Edward Sekandi, and Adam says Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, because he was one of the speakers during his time. And do you notice that Uganda has actually had very few speakers though? We've had very few speakers who have ruled for a very long time, and we're waiting to see if this will change. Now, moving forward, I want us to start with a little bit of a history about the war that is happening in South Sudan. Now, we know that the war happening in South Sudan is a multi-sided civil war in South Sudan between forces of the government and opposition forces. In December 2013, President Kiir accused his former deputy, Riek Machar, and 10 others of attempting a coup d'etat. Now, we know that Sudan has two, South and Northern Sudan, that have been separated. Now, the Southern Sudan is for the Dinkas. And that is where we have a border between Yei, Juba, and Arua, so to say, Koboko, and Sudan. And then we know that there's also Northern Sudan, where they are the semi-Arabs who are in the Northern Sudan. And the reason why that line was created is because the Northerners thought, oh, there's oil, we're browner skin compared to the other people in South Sudan, and so that line was created. And the Northern are actually enjoying more peace than the South are. Adam, what do you make of it?
Well, that's the country where they ousted Bashir, I think. The Sudan, it's called Sudan. The North Sudan, as okay, we can attribute it, but it is Sudan. But, and you know, there were different people from the very start, because those people used to speak a lot of, you know, Arabic.
Yes.
And these people, you know, even, you know, when you see them, they're really different. Physically black and then light skin. And until when, you know, it's one of the youngest nations in Africa, but you know, it is seeing a lot of instabilities from then. The presidents that come, people hold guns. A number of people and Ugandans have died in South Sudan. And you know, since, you know, when a country is amidst wars, Latifa, it's when business needs to, you know, work out.
Exactly.
Okay? There needs to be food, you know, a lot of things are needed. So, and these things come from Uganda. So the country is politically unstable, a lot of things. And then coronavirus also ravaged them. So they have a lot of problems. And, you know, they have guns. They had two, you know, sides, just like you said, Riek Machar and the others. And it's a very hard thing for Ugandans. And there have been a number of cases, Latifa, you know, holding guns, they're in the bushes, they want free money, the country is politically unstable, you know, the cash is going down, there's inflation, there's a lot of things, and you know, this all attributes it, and it, you know, it results into crime. The crime rates goes high.
Why we're discussing this matter in particular is that just on the 30th of March 2021, the month that just ended, a number of Ugandans were murdered in the distance between Yei and Juba, the route in between there. 9 Ugandans were murdered. However, 4 of them were brought back, their bodies were brought back to Koboko after the Kania Mario Obiga, the Minister of State for Internal Affairs, spoke to their Sudanese counterparts and asked them to bring back those bodies to Uganda. Now, the passengers that were in that car that was attacked on 30th were, how many? 13 people were attacked in that time. And among them, the first numbers that were released were 4 people. However, later the numbers increased to 9 people when the bullets that were shot at the car killed other people who had been taken for treatment. Among them, Stephen Amati, Dada Abugo, Ali Soni, and Saddam Noah, who were among the people who were brought back to their families in Uganda to be buried. Now, this is not the first time that Ugandans were killed in South Sudan, or even the border between South Sudan and Uganda. And the insecurities in South Sudan are spilling to Uganda, because now what is happening is that UPDF, you remember last time when UPDF had to be sent to bring back Ugandans from South Sudan, right? And there was a truck that was sent and Ugandans were brought back into the country. Some of them were unable to do it. Some of them died in the process. We also remember that 2 weeks earlier, 8 fishermen were killed. Remember that incident, Ada? 8 fishermen were killed in the Adujo landing site in Kajoke County along River Nile, which is shared, of course, by us and Sudan.
Latifa, this has been happening, just like how I've been telling you. So it can only be attributed to the political instability. They have rebels, and these rebels need goods. You know that route from Juba, you know, coming to Uganda, the roads Nimuli, and they have been advised to change the route to Nimuli and leave the other one of Yeye. So I think the problem is about the rebels. They have rebel groups that are trying to fight the government, and that is a problem that we are having. And, you know, people are not sensitized enough that, you know, these are people that belong to another country. These are people that bring businesses to, you know, to our country, and in turn, probably, our country can develop. You know, they bring food, because a lot of food comes from Uganda to Sudan. Entirely everything comes from Uganda. And, you know, I think this can scare away potential, you know, traders to trade in South Sudan. And there have been reports, you know, people saying, hey, going to South Sudan, I can't do that. So it is a very dangerous place, according to a lot of people that have been there. It's very hard to do business there. And, you know, there are unconfirmed reports about, you know, people being rude in Sudan, you know, the foreigners, that kind of fear of foreigners, the xenophobia, the kind of fear for foreigners is still there. And yet, you know, Uganda is a very good country. We welcome everyone. They are brothers, they are our sisters. So I think it's going to be a problem to the traders, because everyone's, you know, intention is to make business and make things thrive. So I don't know what is going to happen, but people are going to fear to go to Sudan, and I think it's a problem to them.
Well, aside from people fearing to go to Sudan, the relationship between Sudan and Uganda is definitely going to have a problem, and it's going to be affected, because we also remember in June 2013 when former IGP of South Sudan, General Pieng Kuo, and Ugandan former IGP Kale Kaihura, who met and formed a bilateral agreement to say that we are going to man the borders as a joint force between Sudan and Uganda. However, even after that, we see that the rampant killing of Ugandans continued, and there was a time when there was a gun shooting between the Ugandan and South Sudan border, and 2 Ugandan soldiers died and 2 South Sudan soldiers died, and the killing became more rampant during the second outbreak of the war in South Sudan. And we also know that on October 29th, 2020 is when that happened, on the clash at the border when 2 soldiers were killed. Now, the bodies were received by Wilson Sanya, the mayor of Koboko, and the RPC, that is the Aswa Stephen Kaija at the level border in Amoro district, and they were taken to the hospital for post-mortem. We hope that their souls rest in eternal peace. Definitely. And we pray that they find strength in these trying times. And for now, Ugandans need to be really careful when they're going to South Sudan. They ought to be extremely careful, because aside from just killing, on that route of the Yei border, people are being attacked, robberies, people are being killed and their property stolen. And we need to be careful. If we need to pause our businesses in Sudan, I think we ought to do so.
Definitely, Latifa, though it's a kind of tricky situation. You know, just like how I've said, in times of war and, you know, the country is unstable, some people get, rich. You know, so rich, and it's a time when things have ruptured, a lot of things are happening, you know, buildings, so business really thrives, though it's a very hard environment to make business, but then money comes. So I think it's kind of confusing, and that's why people go to places of war to make money. It happens. Just like our PDRS says, there's always opportunity in a crisis. So if it's a crisis, there's opportunity, but then we need to be careful as Ugandans. Going to Sudan, what you do there, what happens, and everything. So we just need to be careful. Life, you know, is the ultimate thing. When you don't have life, you can make money.
Definitely. Well, that is from Adam. Keep making money, but make sure that you're very safe and you take care of yourself while you are doing that.